Power's out, the neighborhood starts scrambling, and the first thing most people lose isn't water or Wi-Fi. It's the food already sitting in their fridge and freezer. In this video, I'm showing a simple $299 setup that protects that food without a loud generator. A small chest freezer, a few frozen water jugs as cold batteries, and a compact power station you can recharge with a small solar panel or even your car. It's plug and play, beginner-friendly, and based on real power numbers, not guesswork. Let's break down exactly what to buy, how to set it up, and how this can keep food cold for weeks, and, with solar, potentially for months. Number 1. What spoils first? In a prolonged power outage, the thing most households lose fastest is perishable food. Everything sitting in the fridge, and a big chunk of what's in the freezer. It's not because people don't care. It's because most of us learned the wrong mental model. We picture the power will be back in a few hours, so we keep opening the door, checking, grabbing snacks, and turning a cold box into a warm box. The food safety guidance is blunt. Keep the doors closed. The FDA says an unopened refrigerator keeps food cold for about 4 hours, and a full freezer holds a safe temperature for about 48 hours, about 24 hours if it's half full. Those numbers assume the door stays shut and the room isn't roasting hot. Once you blow past that window, you're forced into guesswork, and guesswork usually ends with wasted food. The other common problem is overkill. People jump straight to, "I need a generator," then look at prices, fuel storage, noise, and safety concerns, and they quit before they start. There's a middle path that's way simpler. Cut the energy required to keep food cold, then cover that smaller energy need with a small battery and a small solar panel. That's the whole game. Instead of trying to run your entire house, you protect the one asset that quietly represents hundreds of dollars and a lot of meals: your cold storage. This is also why outages feel worse now than people expect. The U.S. Energy Information Administration has reported national average outage durations in the multiple hours per customer per year range, and in some recent years, major storms pushed that average higher. The exact number isn't the point. The pattern is. You don't need a once-in-a-lifetime disaster for a multi-day outage to happen somewhere. Another detail that catches beginners off guard is how quickly grocery stores and gas stations become messy during regional outages. It's not just that shelves go empty. It's that everyone's trying to solve the same problem at the same time. If you can keep your food cold at home, you avoid the rush, you avoid impulse buying, and you buy yourself time. Time is the real resource in any emergency. So the goal here isn't survival fantasy. It's everyday preparedness. Keep the food you already paid for, keep it safe, and keep your options open. Now the key question becomes practical. How much electricity does it really take to keep food frozen? And what setup gets you the most days per dollar?
Number 2. Why chest freezers change the math.
A typical kitchen-fridge-freezer combo is convenient, but it's not built for efficiency during an outage. The freezer compartment is small, the door opens from the front, and every time you open it, cold air spills out like water. Cold air is heavier than warm air, so it sinks. That means an upright freezer dumps its cold air onto the floor the moment the door cracks open. Then the compressor has to run longer to pull the temperature back down. A chest freezer flips that design. The lid opens from the top, so most of the cold air stays in the box. You grab what you need, close it, and the temperature barely moves. That one design detail is why chest freezers are so popular in off-grid cabins and serious preparedness setups. It's also why a small, affordable backup power kit can keep one running, while the same kit struggles with a full-size fridge. Energy numbers make this real. Energy Star says a certified chest freezer uses about 215 kilowatt hours per year, while a certified upright freezer uses about 395 kilowatt hours per year. Divide by 365 and you get a rough daily average, about 0.6 kilowatt hours per day for the chest freezer and about 1.1 kilowatt hours per day for the upright. Those are averages, not guarantees, but they explain the direction. And kilowatt hours per day is the number that matters for backup power. A kilowatt hour is just a simple unit, power times time. Running 100 watts for 10 hours is 1,000 watt-hours, which is 1 kilowatt hour. If you want a quick way to compare models at the store, look at the yellow Energy Guide label. It lists estimated kilowatt hours per year, which is basically your fuel burn rate for electricity. Lower is easier to support off-grid. The second reason chest freezers work so well is thermal stability. They usually have thick insulation and a big, consistent cold zone. If you store food in baskets and you don't leave a lot of empty airspace, the temperature doesn't swing much.
That reduces compressor runtime and reduces the energy you need to replace lost cold. If you're starting from zero, a small chest freezer in the 5 to 7 cubic foot range is the sweet spot for beginners. Big enough to matter, small enough to fit in a closet corner, utility room, or apartment nook. Capacity depends on what you store, but that size is often enough for roughly 150 to 200 pounds of mixed frozen foods. If you already own a freezer, the idea still applies. The more efficient the cold box, the cheaper it is to protect. Before you buy anything, there's a simple, low-stress way to get your real numbers. Plug your freezer into a basic plug-in power meter for a week and read the total kilowatt hours. That tells you what your specific unit uses in your specific home. No guessing, no marketing claims. Once you know your kilowatt hours per day, sizing a battery and solar panel becomes straightforward.
Number 3, turning stored water into stored cold. People think of a freezer as a place to store food. For outage planning, it's better to think of it as a cold battery. The easiest way to add battery capacity is thermal mass, stuff that freezes solid and holds temperature. Water is perfect because it's cheap, safe, and you already understand it. Fill empty space with frozen water bottles, 2-liter bottles, or tightly sealed gallon jugs. This does 2 useful things. First, during normal everyday life, the freezer runs less because there's less air inside. Air warms up quickly. Solid ice warms up slowly. Second, during an outage, all that ice has to melt before your food warms up. That buys time, and time is everything when you're waiting out a storm or a grid problem. A practical tip: don't fill rigid containers all the way to the top before freezing. Water expands when it freezes, so leave a little headspace so the container doesn't split. Also, skip glass in a freezer that might get bumped or moved. Plastic is safer. If you want a simple mental image, imagine 2 freezers, one half empty and one packed solid. In the half-empty one, warm air can circulate, the temperature rises faster, and the food thaws sooner. In the packed one, the cold is locked in by the ice and the dense mass of frozen food. The FDA's 48-hour guidance assumes a full freezer with the door closed. Thermal mass is how you make full easier and cheaper. You don't need to fill the freezer with expensive meat right away. You can fill the gaps with water today. The water isn't wasted either. In a long outage, as those jugs thaw, You've also created a backup supply of clean drinking water, which is a nice side benefit. A small upgrade that makes a big difference is insulation on the lid during an outage. The lid is often the weakest part of the insulation system. Laying a folded blanket, sleeping bag, or thick comforter over the top reduces heat coming in from the room.
It's not magic, but it can slow down warming, especially if the freezer is in a warm garage. The rule during an outage is simple. Don't open it unless you have to, and when you do, be quick. If you need frequent access, pull tomorrow's food into a cooler and leave the freezer closed. This is also where a cheap thermometer becomes a decision tool. Foodsafety.gov and USDA guidance both point to the same basic idea. If frozen food still contains ice crystals or is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius, or below, it can be safe to refreeze, even if quality drops. The point isn't to push limits. It's to avoid throwing away food unnecessarily because you had no data. Set your freezer to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 18 degrees Celsius, during normal use, and verify it with an appliance thermometer instead of trusting the dial. Put the thermometer where you can read it fast. Even better, use a wireless probe thermometer so you can check temperature without opening the lid. There's also a simple, no-tech trick for beginners. Freeze a small cup of water, place a coin on top of the ice, and keep it in the freezer. If you come back and the coin is buried under the ice, you'll know the freezer warmed enough for the ice to melt and refreeze. It doesn't tell you exact temperatures, but it tells you something happened, which is useful after a long outage. Thermal mass plus keep it closed can already protect food for days. But the title here says months, and that's where we add a small amount of electricity back into the system, just enough to keep the cold battery topped off. Number 4, the $299 backup kit that actually fits the job. For long outages, you don't need a whole house generator to save your food. You need a battery that can run a freezer compressor and a way to recharge that battery without relying on the grid. That's it. The simplest version is a portable power station plus a solar panel. It's basically a battery, an inverter that makes household AC power, and a few ports in a box. For a freezer, there are 3 specs that matter more than anything else: usable battery capacity, inverter output, and surge handling. Capacity is measured in watt-hours. If your freezer uses 0.6 kilowatt-hours per day, that's 600 watt-hours per day. Now add real-world losses. The inverter isn't 100% efficient, and the freezer might run a bit more in hot weather. So a safe planning number might be 700 to 900 watt-hours per day, depending on conditions. That doesn't mean you need a 900 watt-hour battery. Remember, you're adding solar. The battery's job is to bridge nighttime and cloudy hours. The solar panel's job is to cover the daily energy budget. Inverter output is the continuous wattage the power station can deliver. Many small units are rated 300 watts, 600 watts, or 1000 watts. A small chest freezer might only run at 80 to 150 watts once it's running, but compressors need a brief startup surge when they kick on. A common rule of thumb is 2 to 3 times the running wattage for a split second. That's why surge rating matters. If the power station can't handle that surge, it may shut off right when the freezer tries to start, which is the worst kind of failure. Everything looks fine until it isn't. In practical terms, for a small chest freezer, a power station with a solid 600-watt surge capability is usually in the safe zone, and more surge headroom is even better. Another spec worth looking for is pure sine wave output on the AC outlets.
Most modern power stations provide it, and it's friendlier for motors and compressors than rougher waveforms.
You don't need to obsess over it, but if a product doesn't clearly say it, that's a yellow flag. Battery chemistry matters too, mainly for longevity. Many newer budget units use lithium iron phosphate, LiFePO4, which is a long-life lithium battery type. You don't have to memorize that name. Just know that it's generally built for a lot of charge cycles, and it tends to be stable and durable. Now the solar panel. People see 100-watt panel and assume it makes 100 watts all day. Real solar doesn't work like that. Output depends on sun angle, clouds, shade, and heat. But a good 100-watt panel in decent conditions can still make a few hundred watt-hours in a day. Think in ranges. Maybe 300 to 600 watt-hours on a decent day, less on ugly days. A 200-watt panel gives you more breathing room, and breathing room is what turns days into months. Also, if you're in an apartment, placing a panel behind window glass usually cuts output a lot. If you can safely put it on a balcony, outside a window, or in direct sun outdoors, it performs much better. The other practical detail is compatibility. Solar panels often use MC4 connectors, while power stations may use an 8mm plug, Anderson plug, or a brand-specific input. You don't need to build anything. Just get the correct adapter cable so it's plug and play, and keep that cable stored with the panel. Here's what the $299 idea usually looks like in the real world. You catch a sale on a small power station bundled with a 60-watt to 100-watt folding panel, or you buy a budget power station and a basic 100-watt panel separately. The exact brand doesn't matter as much as the specs. If your freezer is efficient and you've added thermal mass, that modest solar input can keep you in the game. And even if solar is weak for a day or two, you have backup charging options. Most power stations can charge from a 12-volt car outlet. That means your vehicle can act like a temporary generator. Drive for a bit, top up the battery, and you've bought more freezer time without storing gasoline. If you do that, do it safely. Never run a vehicle in a closed garage, because carbon monoxide is a real hazard. At this point, the system is simple. Chest freezer plus frozen water for thermal mass, plus portable power station, plus solar panel. Now, the month's claim depends on one thing: whether your average daily solar charging keeps up with your average daily freezer use. If it does, the setup can run indefinitely, because you're just cycling energy from the sun into the freezer. Number 5. Making months realistic instead of wishful thinking. The reason this approach works is that freezers don't need constant power. They need occasional compressor runs to pull the temperature back down. So you can think in temperature, not in minutes. If the freezer is sitting at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 18 degrees Celsius, and you have a lot of ice inside, it can drift upward slowly. Your goal is to prevent it from drifting into unsafe territory, and you do that with short bursts of power. That's why a modest battery can work. It doesn't have to run the freezer non-stop. It has to run it long enough each day to replace the heat that leaked in. One underrated trick is to pre-chill before a storm. If you know a major outage is likely, hurricane, ice storm, planned shutoff, turn the freezer a little colder than normal for 12 to 24 hours while grid power is still available. You're basically storing extra cold in the thermal mass. Then, when the outage hits, you have more buffer. Another simple move is to shift the most fragile items first. Use the refrigerator as long as it's safe, but when it gets close to that 4-hour mark, move the most important fridge foods into the freezer
while you still have cold capacity. Your freezer is a better long-term insurance policy than the fridge. The next step is reducing your daily energy requirement. Placement helps a lot. A freezer sitting in a cool basement will use less energy than the same freezer sitting in a hot garage. Airflow matters too. Don't shove the back of the unit tight against a wall if the manual calls for clearance. Dusty coils make compressors work harder, so a quick vacuum or brush clean now and then is low-effort efficiency. Check the lid gasket too. If it's dirty, cracked, or not sealing, you're bleeding cold 24/7 and paying for it in solar and battery capacity. Access habits matter just as much. Plan what you're pulling out. Keep a simple inventory list on the lid.
Use baskets so you can lift one basket, grab what you need, and close the lid quickly. Every extra minute with the lid open is heat you'll have to pay for later with battery power. Now, the solar strategy. You don't have to be a solar expert. You just need consistent placement with minimal shade. Shade is a big deal. Even a partial shadow can cut output sharply. If you can, position the panel so it gets the most direct sun around midday, because that's when you usually get the highest output. If you're dealing with winter storms, you might get fewer strong sun hours, so you may want more panel wattage or a larger battery buffer. If you're dealing with summer outages, panels can produce a lot, but freezers also work harder in heat, so you still want headroom. A simple sizing method for beginners is: find your freezer's daily energy use in watt-hours, then aim for solar that can produce at least that much on an average day, and battery capacity that can carry you overnight, plus some extra. Example math. If your freezer uses 600 watt-hours per day, and you assume your solar harvest is 500 watt-hours per day in your conditions, you're close but not comfortable. If you bump solar to where you can average 800 to 1000 watt-hours on good days, you can cover cloudy dips and still keep the battery healthy. You can also reduce energy use by running a chest freezer as a refrigerator when you want maximum efficiency. This is a plug-in trick. You use an external temperature controller that turns the freezer on and off to hold fridge temps, around 37 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 degrees Celsius. Running at fridge temperature usually uses less energy than holding 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and that means smaller solar and smaller battery can support it longer. Some people run 2 chest units, one as a freezer, one as a fridge, and still use less power than a normal kitchen fridge. You don't need 2 to get value from the idea. Even 1 unit that you can switch modes on gives you flexibility. In a long outage, a cold fridge can be more useful day to day than a deep freezer, especially for things like dairy, leftovers, and some medications. Food choice keeps the whole system practical. A freezer full of novelty snacks is easy to lose and hard to replace. Focus on versatile basics: meat, frozen vegetables, butter, bread products, and ingredients that help you build meals. For quality, packaging matters. If you're storing meat for months, tight wrapping or vacuum sealing cuts down freezer burn and keeps texture better. Keep a pantry base that doesn't need refrigeration at all. Rice, beans, oats, canned foods, peanut butter. So you're not betting your entire food plan on electricity, even if you have solar. When you stack layers like that, the freezer becomes a high-value bonus instead of a single point of failure. The final piece that keeps months from turning into disappointment is routine. Charge the power station fully, keep the panel accessible, keep spare cords in one place, and practice once. You don't want your first test to happen at 2 a.m. in the dark with melting food. Number 6. Testing, safety, and the mistakes that ruin good setups. The easiest way to make this reliable is to run a calm, boring test on a normal day. Step 1. Check your freezer temperature with a thermometer and confirm it's holding around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Step 2. Plug the freezer into the power station and see if it starts cleanly. If the station trips or alarms when the compressor kicks on, that's a surge issue, and you want to know that now, not during an outage. Step 3. Measure real energy use. Many power stations display watts in and out. Let the freezer run for a few hours and watch the average draw and the cycling pattern. Step 4. Test solar charging in the exact place you plan to use it. If you set the panel behind a window and you only get a trickle charge, that's not a solar problem, it's a placement problem. Move it outdoors where it sees direct sun and the numbers usually change dramatically. There are a few common beginner mistakes that are easy to avoid. One is buying a power station that's too small because the freezer only uses 100 watts. The running watts are not the full story. You need surge handling and enough capacity to cover the hours when solar is weak. Another is ignoring empty space. A half-empty freezer warms faster, and you'll spend more battery power keeping it cold. Fill gaps with water jugs and keep it packed. Another is treating the freezer like a snack drawer and opening it constantly during an outage. If you need daily access, move a small portion of food to a cooler and keep the main lid shut. Another is skipping temperature tracking. If you don't know your temperatures, you can't make confident decisions about safety. FoodSafety.gov and the USDA both emphasize not tasting food to test it and using thermometers instead. If you're using any fuel-based generator as a secondary backup, treat carbon monoxide like the serious threat it is.
The CDC's guidance is clear. Never run a generator inside your home, basement, or garage, or near windows and doors. Keep it outdoors at a safe distance and use CO alarms. The beauty of the battery and solar approach is that it's quiet and it can operate without combustion, but people still end up mixing methods during major storms, so safety needs to be part of the plan, not an afterthought. Also, watch the small electrical details. Use the right gauge extension cord if you must use one, and don't coil it tightly when it's carrying a load. Keep cords dry. Don't overload outlets. Follow the manufacturer instructions for the power station and the freezer. Battery care matters too. If you store the power station for long periods, don't forget it exists. Check it, top it up, and make sure the firmware and settings still make sense. Some units have eco modes that shut off outputs after a while. That can be helpful for phones, but it can accidentally cut power to a freezer if you don't understand how your model behaves. That's why testing is so important. This setup stays beginner-friendly because it avoids wiring, avoids fuel storage, and keeps everything plug and play. If you want a practical checklist to keep taped to the freezer lid, keep it short. Freezer packed with food and water jugs. Thermometer inside. Blanket ready for the lid. Power station charged. Solar panel accessible. Cords and adapters in a bag. And a plan for what you'll eat first, so you're not digging around. If you do those basics, your freezer stops being a countdown timer and starts being a long-term buffer, even when the grid is down.